paint the air that surrounds my subjects. Time and distance always reveal a greater understanding of the moment and the emotions which are time-stamped in each and every one of my paintings. In 1955, my family moved to Farmington, New Mexico, where my father opened his dental practice. It was in 1958 that my parents purchased a farm in La Plata, just north of Farmington. School was very difficult for me. In those days, they referred to children with dyslexia as stupid, and my parents hoped the small school would help my lessons.
I just knew that I had to help him, and so I did it. I didn't know anything about the dyslexia at the time.
I know my father was embarrassed by his very effeminate son, the other reason that they moved to the farm. Although misguided, but with good intention, my father wanted to make a man of me, and those many important skills I learned on the farm have stayed with me all of my life. I had been begging my parents for art supplies for a very long time. I did not know the teachers at school had told them that art was distracting me. When my parents bought my sister a paint set, I was very angry with them.
He watched me for a long time, and then he said, "You're doing that wrong. Here, let me show you." And he started doing actual painting things with it.
Oh, yeah. He was looking at the clouds. But he does that quite often already. And he drove that Ford tractor. It landed square dab in that ditch, and we had to pull it out. He never did take to all this farming.
I watched him paint. And he just kept painting and painting and painting, and he just kept mastering it.
Shortly after high school graduation in 1969, with only $10 in quarters in my pocket, I found my way to Grand Canyon for the first time. My first attempt at painting this vastness was humiliating, and it soon found its way in flight over the edge. At that moment, I had an epiphany. I wanted to do more than just paint Grand Canyon. I wanted to master it. I always felt forced to hide my natural instincts growing up in a very conservative Mormon community. In college, I tried to play by the rules that I felt society demanded of me. Shortly after the birth of my daughter Miranda in 1975, I moved my young family to Taos, New Mexico. Certainly one of my better decisions. In Taos, I met artists and men just like myself. In the culture of Taos, no one treated me as if I was stupid, and no one looked at me as if I was broken. It was the first time that the real Curt had been accepted. I was very fortunate to be close to so many of the great artists that lived there at the time. One of the artists that I made friends with was the great Rod Goebel. He allowed me to go painting with him. Rod encouraged me to paint from life and to appreciate the seasons. I learned to paint the mood of the day and embrace the moment. He was the most intuitive painter I've ever known. I had a need to explore the academic side of painting, and so I wrote the greatest living landscape painter of the day, Wilson Hurley. First time I took my paintings to his studio, waved his hand in front of a cliffside, and he said, "Damn it, Curt, this hillside is round." And instantly I got it. I understood form. This was the greatest gift of knowledge ever given to me, which I used to win the Stacy Scholarship. My daughter Veronica was born in 1978. I very much enjoyed being a father and loved my little girls very much. I had hoped the children would bring happiness to our home, but I still found myself growing very unhappy being married. I wanted to be close to the Grand Canyon, and I needed to be close to the galleries in Scottsdale and Sedona. Mistakenly, I believed that if I moved to Sedona, I could save a failing relationship.
Before Gerald died, Curt had sold one for $12,000. We were just so happy.
The death of my father in 1980 set off a range of emotions in me that I truly did not understand. In 1983, I truly was depressed and started to drink way too much. In my art, I was exploring a very controlled and pointillist technique. These paintings were solid compositions, but they certainly reflected the uptight emotions that I was feeling at the time. The time had come. I faced the most sad and difficult decision of my life.
Once I understood the reason why the divorce happened, I wasn't angry at you for leaving us there, because there's a giant difference between choosing to leave us there and having to leave us there.
I was very fortunate to have met Tom Daly at this time. He is a businessman with a great sense of humor, all wrapped in Southern charm. He was my hero then, and he continues to be my hero now.
If it had to be, I'm glad it was Tom. And the fact that Tom is willing to give up a lot for Curt to be Curt.
In 1984, Wilson Hurley told me I would never be invited to the Pretty West show at the National Cowboy Museum because of my lifestyle. I found his hurtful words to be liberating. I realized I had been confining my style and study and limiting myself to just the Western art market. I felt my shackles had been removed. Wilson's rejection gave me the freedom to start exploring a much broader world. My life and my art were taking me on new adventures. Tom encouraged me to follow my instincts. Outdoors is where I wanted to go. This was the first time in my life I didn't have to fight anyone just so I could go paint, and it was exciting. In 1986 and 1987, my paintings took on a very soft and gray quality. I think I was hiding in the paint. I have been blessed with very good health all of my life. These paintings were a deep emotional reaction to the sadness I felt for the national demonization and fear of men like myself. You could only feel the soul in these paintings if you stood in front of them long enough. In the late 1980s, I realized alcohol had stolen most of the decade from me. I decided to stop drinking, and with a clear head, I dedicated myself to nothing but plein air painting. After two back-to-back one-man shows in 1988 and 1989, I had earned a trip to Paris. And it was awesome. I had come to Paris to study impressionism. As I stood in front of the Monet paintings, I began to cry. I learned to see so much more than just the buildings, the people, or the flowers. I learned to paint the air that surrounds all subjects. I took my newfound knowledge home to paint the Grand Canyon. Plein air painting was now a very different experience for me. With confidence and a healthy body, I began to drag large canvases directly to the canyon's edge. I was extremely happy when I completed these large canvases outdoors. My paintings were taking on a feeling of impressionism, but occasionally they would find their way to expressionism. As I was working on a show for Trailside, I began to journal about my paintings as I completed them. I submitted my writings to American Artist magazine, hoping they would write an article. I was excited when editor Stephen Doherty arranged my journal notes into a standalone article that appeared in the December 1991 issue of American Artist magazine. I have always been intimidated when it comes to verbal communication, and this article was no exception. I was hesitant to even submit my words to Stephen because of my dyslexia and the emotional baggage from my childhood. I have few fond memories of growing up in Farmington. I was punished, belittled, and humiliated for not having a brain like everyone else. I never understood what I did to my classmates to be bullied and treated this way. My form of dyslexia affected my coordination, and so I had no athletic abilities. In the Farmington, New Mexico school system of the 1950s and 60s, only the beautiful, academic, or athletically gifted children had any value. All of the unkind remarks and nasty attitudes caused me to develop feelings of self-loathing. I always felt unwanted, unattractive, and fat. On these pages were my words, my techniques, my paintings, my emotions, published by the premier art magazine of its day. Something remarkable happened. I experienced a paradigm shift when I saw my words published in American Artist magazine. At that moment, I left a big part of my childhood insecurities in the past. For the first time in my life, I felt attractive, and I realized I don't have to know how to throw a baseball to feel good about myself. I was learning to live with my dyslexia, but most importantly, I decided that I would no longer allow anyone, and I mean anyone, to shame me. I entered the 1990s with the confidence that would serve me very well. I experienced a whole new world of color and texture when I found my way to Bali in 1994. The people were sweet and spiritual, and I felt free to roam the island with large canvases. When I returned home, my paintings began to explode with primary colors, a direct result of that Indonesian experience. Ironically, after being told in the 1980s that my paintings did not have enough color, the galleries now were complaining that I was using too much color. What an interesting turn of events in my life.
I have to say, I don't think there's any question that paintings of the Grand Canyon, and Curt's in particular, make you look at it differently.
On behalf of the members and the board and the staff of the Grand Canyon Trust, my friend Curt Walters, a painting by Curt that's being donated to the park, a national treasure to another national treasure.
I had 20 rejection letters from Pretty West, but finally, in 1998, I was invited to participate. Tom felt that it might damage my career if he went with me to this very important art show. So I asked my friend Lee Hubbard to join me. Following the sale and right before the banquet was to begin, 1,200 of us were suddenly ushered to the basement because of a tornado warning. When the danger had passed, we all sat down to cold steaks and warm salads in what seemed like the light of a 60-volt bulb. To my great surprise, it was announced I was the winner of the Buyer's Choice Award. My heart began to race as I thought about how many years it had taken me to get into this room. I made my way through the dark so I could deliver my acceptance speech by megaphone to a room full of people who could not hear me. I wish I could have expressed how important this moment was for me. Even to this day, this is my most treasured award. Over the years, I have done several paintings from Yaqui Point. When I put the paintings together, I discovered that I had told the story of the air quality at Grand Canyon. I felt a call to action, and Grand Canyon Trust gave me a voice.
What really struck me about you, Curt, was not that you were a good artist. I began to realize how much you thought about quality of the air, how much you thought about the spirit of the place in the painting. And I was so struck by that. I thought we have to figure out something to connect the passion and the talent to the place. And you said, well, what if we went on a landscaping artist trip? What if we went down the river?
There were 14 of us.
You were able not only to, by your own example, donate some of your work to the trust so we could sell it and raise money. You persuaded those artists that that was going to be part of the deal. And then Kip Forbes, I love painting. He then sponsored the art exhibit in New York City. That was quite lovely. And they curated that show beautifully. It was.
It was really beautiful.
In the public's mind, it forever put your name and the Grand Canyon together.
A new chapter in my Grand Canyon story began when I met Deborah Tuck. As a board member of the Grand Canyon Foundation, I had the opportunity to travel with her and speak about the challenges of raising private funding for a very public national park.
I wanted there to be at least one scientist on the board and at least one prominent artist. That changes the debate and it secures the dream. And securing the dream was why I came to you.
It was an amazing adventure to raft the lower half of Grand Canyon in 2003 with Deborah and the National Park Service. This trip inspired Apache Walls, winning me the Frederick Remington Painting Award at Pretty West in 2004.
As an artist and as a curator, I appreciate the fact that you do other subjects. I think it reflects a pretty good degree of self-confidence to not feel like you have to be constrained as a Grand Canyon painter.
My father was not an affectionate man. It seemed he was always angry. It was clear to me that I never made him proud. But during my youth, I was able to find a connection with him through his love of the Southwest. These few happy moments meant a great deal to me. They were the only way I was truly able to bond with him. My last conversation with him before he died was not about his lung cancer. It wasn't about our family, but it was about my artwork of the Southwest. This was the closest thing to his approval that I was ever going to get. One of the more interesting bonding moments with my dad was when he took his family to see Glen Canyon and the dam while under construction prior to the flooding and creation of Lake Powell in 1964. In 2018, I boated up lake 63 miles so I could paint the scenery and hike the Rainbow Bridge. The Intermountain West was out my back door growing up and inspired many of my first paintings. As I paint these great landscapes today, I forget that I have aged. I am youthfully eager for the next challenge. In the 1990s, my art was represented in California by the Jones Gallery in La Jolla and Trailside Galleries in Carmel. I spent a great deal of time painting the coastal states of Washington, Oregon, and California. I look back now and realized how fortunate I was in those days. I would relive it all over again in a heartbeat. I have gone to Oak Creek Canyon and painted every season for every year that I have lived in Sedona. I still get excited with each and every change of season. My trip to Jordan in the Middle East was a trip just for me. It was something I wanted to do all of my life. The highlight of that trip was painting in the World Heritage Site of Petra. I also had the opportunity to paint in the city of Amman. As a child, I never dreamed I would have the opportunity to visit the Forbes Chateau in Normandy, France. Chateau de Belleroy is one of the most beautiful and historic monuments of the region, and I have been invited to paint there 4 times. Shh, don't tell anyone, but it was with some guilt that I would listen to soap operas while painting in the studio. It was Susan Lucci's affair with the young Hungarian prince on All My Children which inspired my trip to Prague and Budapest in 2003. I love English art, and I love the change of pace painting in England. All my art heroes have painted in Venice. Standing in their footprints is exciting. Painting the same subjects and complicated architecture with my own interpretation is the real challenge. On my first trip to Canada, I had 5-month-old baby Miranda in tow. My last few trips have been much easier. Every great American landscape painter has tried their hand at Niagara Falls. I too felt a need to try this subject. They would not let me paint in the gardens of Bouchard, but I felt redeemed when I found a beautiful rose garden at the Empress Hotel. I could not get my brushes to canvas fast enough once I got home. I had to paint this 36 by 36 of the Bouchard Gardens. I find great beauty in the rhythm of the drift logs that line the Pacific northern coast. It was so cool to be recognized by the 1998 Artists of America show in Denver for my European painting, Ethereal Magic of Lauterbrunnen. Unbelievably, this was my third Buyer's Choice Award within the span of 1 year.
One of the things I love about the canyon and the Colorado Plateau as a subject is that the sky is an important part. I love the atmosphere, I love weather, I love atmospheric and weather effects. I mean, I can look in yours and tell exactly what's going on.
After winning the Buyer's Choice Award for my painting, Winter Grandeur Besieged, Wilson Hurley warned me that I would never win the Pretty West Purchase Award. There was a very sweet irony that Wilson was there to watch me claim that very prize for my painting Spring's Caprice in 2007. That evening was extra special because I also won Buyer's Choice Award for Raw's Domain. Following the show, Wilson came up and hugged me, something way out of his comfort zone. My mentor, my competitor, my antagonist, my friend passed away the following spring.
Do you remember seeing it?
You can't describe it. So wonderful.
On the coattails of the Pretty West Purchase Award win, Tom Tierney from Art of the West magazine called and asked for images for the next issue. He told me I would be surprised. When the magazine arrived, I discovered that Tom and Alan Jor had named me one of the 8 true masters of the American West. I was very excited. I have now had 3 major museum retrospective shows. In all 3 exhibitions, I was overwhelmed to see my art. Some of the paintings I had not seen for a very long time, some of them for decades. I didn't understand the emotions behind these paintings when I created them. The retrospective brought clarity to those emotions, and I could understand them. You know what? These paintings were really good. I could see the passion, not just the labor. The artistic battles of creating those paintings was gone. They were now works of art. Following my retrospective at the Gilcrease, Southwest Art named me one of the 40 most prominent people in the Western art world. There was no need to hide. During my interview with Susan McGarry, I admitted publicly for the first time that I am dyslexic.
I think that one of the things I really admire and enjoy about your work is the connection that I see back with Thomas Moran. I love Thomas Moran, and I don't know how this would ever be interpreted, but I enjoy your work much more.
Thomas Moran is most remembered for his early career paintings of Grand Canyon, reflecting the manifest destiny of 19th century America. Like Moran, I love the romance and grandeur of this great landscape, prompting some contemporary curators to claim that my paintings are too pretty. I know every brushstroke and every canvas I paint is a direct result of the truth that I encounter in today's environment. These are my own unique personal experiences. My paintings are a narrative of my time. A painting trip to Toledo, Spain awakened a hidden desire in me to do a painting of the Spanish conquistadors discovering Grand Canyon in 1540. The search for armor, artifacts, and history of that event soon took me on a number of interesting painting trips. I spent hours sketching the armor in museums around the world, including London and Vienna. My study of the Coronado expedition into the Southwest has led me to Mexico, where I have painted in Cruz de Guanajuato, Compostela, and the incredible Mexico City. Not only do I take my costume models to the Grand Canyon, but I also work with them in the studio. The many hours of historical research, the armor collection, my preparatory sketches, and paintings are all part of my process. When the time comes, I'll be ready to create my large historical painting.
Won't it be fun when we can stand in front of a great painting of the Conquistador by Curt Walters? I think it'll be worth the wait.
People are so quick to compare paintings and photographs. It's an understandable conundrum. One of the things that I really love most about your work, when you get up close, I just love the texture. You can appreciate the distant view. You can appreciate the middle distant view. And then you get up close and there's all this cool stuff going on.
We associate Curt with the Grand Canyon, but it's not difficult to associate him with other areas and other subjects. It's about the art, after all. And he is not a narrow artist by any means. He's an artist of the world, and I think that's important to tell. Whether it's Bali or France or Italy, I would hope and think that through museum collections, private collections, and publications, that all of those things need to recognize the breadth of his work.